Hi, my name is Sarah.
My name is Mujib.
And welcome to another episode of Let's Get To It. This is episode 19.
That's right.
And we are going to speak on the topic of communication.
That sounds fitting for the 19th episode. I mean, we've learned in 19 episodes the best ways to communicate with each other over this microphone, so that's pretty nice.
We have, and actually I think this is a perfectly good opportunity to say that someone reached out to me yesterday that just started listening to our podcast, and she found it quite refreshing in the way that we communicate with each other. She thought it was really natural and authentic, and she really appreciated it.
Nice, perfect.
So, yeah, so kudos to us.
And I mean, that's kind of like the theme of our podcast anyway, is like being natural and authentic, you know, being like coming as you are and speaking what comes to your heart, what's on your mind, you know, and I think that really leads nicely into this episode as well, you know?
Yeah. Communication is just so important for everything that you do and all the relationships that you have. And communication can get so scrambled and be the reason for so many arguments or disagreements or, you know, just kind of think classically like, you don't understand me or you're not listening or, you know, and I think it's at our very root as human beings, we want to be heard. We want to have what we say validated. So, you know, and just everything about communication, from the way you say something, your tone, the intention, the impact, your body language. There's just so many things.
Totally. Yeah. So many ways to communicate. You know?
So many ways. Exactly.
And I really think about like almost like defining people or holding people to certain roles, or, you know, we talk a lot about like the way that somebody might view you off the bat is going to kind of influence the way that they approach you. You know, if I'm not carrying myself in a way that looks respectable, then I'm probably not going to be approached in a very respectable way as far as the definitions of what somebody deems a respectable person is supposed to look like. Which is, it's a catch-22, especially in 2020, because you have this new, very wide spectrum of what a boss is supposed to look like. You know, it's everything from tattoos on your face to the same three-piece button-up suit. Any body that you have, you know, any identification or any sort of like expression that you could have has the opportunity to be a boss now. So, you know, I have this really kind of recurring thought that's like, if folks haven't really caught up to that being the reality, then everything is always like a step behind, you know, like that person's communication style is always a step behind, because you don't realize that the person that you're talking to might be the owner of the business that you're in, or you know, you might not realize that the person who we're saying and want to speak to your manager is actually the manager, you know, something like that. So I think that, you know, in communication, just period, now and going forward, is very much like leave preconceptions at the door. You know, don't necessarily assume that we know about this person who we're about to communicate with. I think about that a lot in my relationships, where I might be in a very close relationship with somebody to the point where, you know, we have to remind each other, like, I can't actually read your mind. And a lot of this conflict is coming from the fact that, like, we're so intertwined with each other. You know, you could look over to be looking for your phone and not say anything to me, and I might be like, your phone's over there. Because in the context, I know that you can only be looking for your phone, looking around like that, and I saw your phone over there, that sort of thing. But there's a trap in that. Because then you start to assume that I should always know where your phone is, and if I don't know where your phone is, then maybe I'm an asshole for that. But in reality, no, like, you shouldn't assume that I can read your mind, or that everything that's going on with you is on the front of my mind. And that can't be like the basis of communication, especially in those kind of intimate relationships where we are so intertwined with each other. That can lead to a lot of that kind of butting heads or miscommunication, because I'll say this a couple of different ways throughout the episode, but the way that I'll say it right now is just like that we're not actually reading each other's minds. I can't hold you accountable for what you're supposed to know about what I'm doing.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, so many things. just because communication is such a broad topic, and this will probably just seem a little off kilter, but you know, the conversation goes where it goes with us. I think about the weaponization of silence is a big one for me. Sometimes it's what we don't say and when we don't say it. And I know that's sort of an aggressive way to to frame it. But speaking very personally, in my household growing up, sort of not speaking, it was kind of like an act of punishment, you know, like, you know, we might say getting the silent treatment. And that has stuck with me. Like if someone is not willing to talk, I start to get really anxious. And what I've actually had to learn is that sometimes it's okay. Sometimes people need time. And maybe you live in a small space, so you can't really, you know, take a time out. So if your partner or someone, you know, that you're living with or sharing space with needs time and they need to be silent, it's not necessarily an act of aggression. They just need to take a few minutes, or, you know, and I know I'm somebody that's always immediately seen that as problematic, just in my upbringing. Like the silence was either, you know, in what someone wasn't saying, then my mind was left to wander. Either they're upset, they're disappointed, they're angry with me. It's like my mind filled in the blank where they weren't telling me what they were thinking. And unfortunately, I always typically went to the negative. But that's something I often think about too, is the power of silence. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean it's a bad thing. But I know that's like a trigger for me. Right.
No, it's like the idea of being in the doghouse or something like that. You know, like maybe I'm super bubbly with you all the time, but you piss me off, and now I'm giving you the cold shoulder. That idea, And
I'm like, why aren't you saying anything? Why aren't you talking to me? What's wrong? Right. What are you thinking? You know, I immediately like go right there, and
that really leads me to think about something as well, which is communication styles.
Yeah.
You know, because we have so much of our defined personality, like what you're talking about, is based on that history, that based on our past experiences, how we came up, what it was in our household, you know. But you know, if you and I are communicating, like we didn't grow up in the same house, so maybe in my household, like silence meant I'm giving room, space, you know, I'm giving you
the floor.
I'm giving you the floor, exactly. I'm leaving it open. It's here for you to take advantage of.
Right.
But, you know, because our communication styles might be different, you see it as one thing and I see it as the other. So it makes me really think about, like, so if you have two people in a relationship and one person is like, I need to process things like right on the spot. Like I'm used to being able to have these big back and forth, like I'm going to say something, then you're going to say something, I'm going to say something, you're going to say something. And if I say something and you don't say anything, then it's my experience that you're not listening to me, or it's my experience that you're ignoring me, or it's my experience that I'm boring you, or something like that. And then you flip the coin and the other person's like, well, I'm actually just giving you room to finish, because it's my experience that when somebody is that heated about something, that you don't cut them off. If somebody is really trying to express themselves, then you give them ample space to express themselves. And, you know, I've had situations where, like, in these relationships, like, I'm a processor. Like, I want to process everything. Like, I want to know from now to the end of this conversation, like, where do we stand? You know what I mean? And then getting into conversations and into conflict with people that are like, that's not how I am at all. Like, I actually need to sit with this for an hour. I need to be quiet. I need to be silent. I need to be distant from you for an hour so I can process everything that you're saying and come back to the table. So with that, a lot of that communication is just understanding the difference in those communication styles and realizing that, like, okay, I can meet you a little bit halfway. Like, I can stop talking and say, look, can we come back in 15 minutes? And then that person could say, okay, maybe I don't need a whole hour. I'll be back in 15 minutes and we can process, because I'm going to try to meet you in the middle, that sort of idea. A lot of this is reverse engineered, though. This has come from arguments and conflicts and, you know, having to kind of take that extra step or go that extra mile to decide, like, this relationship is worth figuring out how to communicate with each other in a way that everybody's fulfilled. You know? Totally.
Yeah. It's I mean, communication is so interesting because there's just so many ways to communicate. And, it is based in so many different things. Your previous experiences, how you grew up, where you grew up. Are you primarily communicating in English or another language? Is someone's first language English or not? Their only language? Is it sign language? Is it, there's just so many things there. In my relationship, my partner, English is not his first language. He's a great English speaker, but we sometimes have these communication hang-ups just over words. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of heightened in our relationship, where very early on I had to learn to say, like, I don't understand you, or I didn't understand what you said, and that not being rude, but I want to understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm. So can you tell me again? And even that sort of leads me to actually think of, again, another tangent here, people's names and the pronunciation of people's names, and how important it is to get that right. And if you don't understand how, if someone introduces himself to you and you didn't get the name, or you don't understand how to say it, that it's okay, it's polite to say, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Could you say your name again? Mm-hmm. So that you can say it right. And again, my experience with my partner, whose name is Dariush, which is not a very common name in North America. He often will have to say it multiple times, or it's a couple different things. There'll be people who you can kind of tell they didn't really get it, or they're not sure, but then they don't say anything. Mm-hmm. It's just like, oh, okay, nice to meet you. And then they never really try to address him personally again after that, which is unfortunate, because like, he has a name. And then there's people who say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that name. Could you say it again? Mm-hmm. And he'll say it again, and it's great. Someone actually takes a stab at it, and it might not be something that the Anglo tongue could pronounce initially. But you break it down, and it's not that difficult to get it right if you're listening and you give it a try. And he works with young kids, and I don't have permission to share this story, but it's my podcast, and it's so when we met, he introduced himself as Darius, which is the anglicized version of his name, Dariush. Oh wow. And I said, okay, but I knew enough to, when I heard him communicating with members of his family, that wasn't the name that they used. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to know how to say, what's your actual name? And in the beginning of that process, I said, I'm going to need to say it a couple times, but I'm going to call you by your name. Mm-hmm. Like, that's important to me. I'm not going to call you Darius. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not your name. And it isn't. And so we went through that early on. And I usually butcher his last name, and he makes fun of me all the time. He makes sure that he tells me how bad I am at it, which is fine. But we got to a point where the answering machine on his phone was not his name. It was an Americanized version of his name. And I just brought it up to him, and I said, it's really none of my business. This is a personal thing for you, but my 2 cents is I think you should have your name on your answering machine. And he was like, yeah, you're right. I should. And it may seem small, but it's actually really significant. Like, have your name. This is your phone. This is your answering machine. This is your digital introduction. This is your chance to announce, like, this is my mailbox, and leave me a message. Mm-hmm. So he changed it, and then he started working with kids. He's an after-school teacher. And I remember him just coming home one day and being like, wow, like, the kids all got my name, like, on the first try. Mm. And it just kind of, like, takes me back to sort of that, just kids and youth. And it's like, it was no thing. Right. It wasn't weird. It wasn't strange. It was like, oh, okay, cool.
Well, they don't have the same preconceptions and hang-ups.
Right.
They don't have a predefined thing that says that they don't know how to pronounce exotic names, quote unquote.
Right. But it was just really cool, and it was cool for him. And I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. That's your name. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to take the grown-ups and the adults like a little extra work. But, to anybody who's, encountered folks that, that might have a name that just doesn't sound familiar to you, like it's not being rude by asking for them to pronounce it again or to help you get it right. It's actually like, that's what you should be doing. It's rude not to, and then to sort of avoid, And I'm not saying this like because I've done that thing. I'm 100. Like, I'll be clear. I have 100% met people before and thought, okay, oh shit, I'm gonna fuck that up, and then I'm like, I can't say it again. I'm just gonna butcher their name, and then being too afraid to ask for clarification, like as if that's problematic. And I'm very glad that I don't do that anymore. But I've done that before, and I mean, those of you listening, I think we can all think of a situation where that's been the case. Or even, let's forget about maybe you've never had that encounter when you meet somebody and then you forget their name, and then you see them again, and you're like, shit.
Right.
Who is that?
Yeah.
And it's just so funny. We get into this like, what are people going to think, or it's perfectly fine to. Hey, you know what? I am so sorry. I forgot your name. Right. Could you just remind me? I know your face, or what, whatever it is. And but it becomes like an uncomfortable situation.
Well, it goes back into that, like, it's like, how much do you actually want to communicate with this person? Like, are they worth enough to take the moment out and acknowledge that I forgot your name, what I mean? Like, is it worth enough? Are you worth enough to me for me to actually know what your name is? Or do I just not care? And okay, see you later. I don't know what that person's name was. You know what I mean? Like, I have a charming way of asking for people's names when I've forgotten their names. Because oftentimes, like, I will fill in the blank in my mind. So I'll be like, what's your name again? And the person will be like, oh, my name is Stephanie. I'm like, oh, great, I was going to call you Samantha. I'm glad I asked, you know what I mean?
Smooth.
Because it's like, because I definitely don't want to say the wrong name. Yeah. I don't want to I called somebody the wrong name the other day and, walked away from them. And immediately upon walking away from them, I was like, damn, I called that person the wrong name.
Yeah.
And like, granted, the person that was standing next to them looked like somebody whose name I pulled out of the hat, and the name sounded similar and same letters, same, number of syllables and everything. But at the same time, like, taking that moment to be able to say, like, oh, damn, like, I called that person the wrong name. Now, did I then, like, race that person back down? Have I sent messages to them on Facebook or something like that? No, probably. I'm not going to do that because it's not really that important. They probably don't realize that I even called them the wrong name because I had a mask on when we were walking away, So it's like all of these different hang-ups with the communication. But the next time I see them, I might say to them, hey, I called you the wrong name the last time,
Yeah.
And, like, I'm sorry, like, I definitely know who you are, that sort of thing. Because it's like a human reality, and I think that becomes like the linchpin of communication. Is like, do I value this experience between you and I enough to be clear in the way that we're communicating with each other? Or, like, here's a thing about me, like, it took me a while to figure out, like, my actual speaking voice, and especially in this area because, I have a different type of slang and different type of cadence and things like that than people are used to in Vermont and New England in general, especially when I first moved up here. And there was somebody who I was with, and eventually I was like, I'm just not going to talk to this person at all. They don't really respect what it is that I'm even saying, because, like, I might finish, like, a whole explanation of something. And the person's like, I didn't understand a thing you just said. Well, damn, Slim, I just talked to you for, like, 4 minutes. Like, at what part did you not understand what I was saying to you? Yeah. And, like, the whole time. Well, where I come from, like, you just tell somebody, hey, I can't hear you, or I can't understand you. Like, what are you talking about? That shows respect. That shows, like, you want to hear what it is that I'm saying. Like, you value me as a person enough to try to understand a little bit better about what I'm saying to you. My name is Mujib. Like, I get Eugene, I get Muji all the time, like, all that different stuff. And it's like, if somebody doesn't value me enough to take that extra second to say, like, how do you say your name, or how do you spell that, or, you know, where's that from, like those different things that allows me to have clear communication with this person, then again, we just miss each other.
Right.
And it feels like it can't just be an American thing. Like, it's just got to be a thing that humans do, where we have this opportunity to, like, kind of write each other off, or fill in the blanks for each other. You know, like, I could fill in the blank that this person's name is Samantha and just call them Samantha all the time. And maybe they're the type of person that's never going to correct me. And they're just going to be Samantha when I call them Samantha. They don't care, you know?
Yeah.
Like, my wife's name is Kenzie. People call her Mackenzie all the time. She'll never correct somebody call her Mackenzie. But we put a little check next to your name for that. You know what I mean? Like, you've known me for 4 years.
You're on the list.
Call my wife Mackenzie. We're going to put a check next to your name, and, you know, that sort of thing. Because at the same time, it's like, you've heard, like, just ask me, like, you're hearing me, I'm not calling her Mackenzie, I'm calling her Kenzie, you know what I mean? But at the same time, like, my folks, like, Kenzie's name is spelled Kenzie, my folks spell her name Kinsy. They all think her name's Kinsey, you know? But that's just how we say it, you know? So, Kinsey, cute, that's Kinsey, beautiful, you know? But it's like an endearing thing, like, you know, there's some people that call her Candy. You know, because they think that that's what she's saying when she says, my name is Kenzie. They're like, oh, Candy. Yeah, okay, I'll be Candy down here then. Like, that sounds cool, that sort of idea, but it's not like a disrespectful thing. And, you know, if people take that extra step to say, like, or sometimes she'll take that extra step and be like, you know, that's not how you spell my name, or that's not how you say my name, or something like that. And that's, again, that's welcoming somebody into the fold. Let me bring you into the fold. Like, do I value you enough to correct you? Or does it even matter to me? Like, I don't care that you think my name is Mujib. It doesn't matter to me. Like, you're just going to kind of, like, prove yourself as you walk around the world calling me Mujib. You know, that guy Mujib, the kettlebell instructor. Right. But I don't know. It's just, the names are always a funny thing for me, because I have a name that I've never heard anybody else have. And it's only, like, ever people from the other side of the world that are like, oh, Mujib, like the river. I'm like, yeah, like the river, exactly. And there are other people like, what the fuck is the river, Mujib? You know, that sort of idea. But it's in Jordan.
It is. It's I have to mention this because it just kind of makes me laugh. And my stepdad, I love my stepdad. Let's just put it out there, because my mom might be listening to this. And he sent me a birthday present, because my birthday was recently. And on the label, it was addressed to Sarah, Sara. And for those of you out there that may have the name Sarah, we know there's two ways to spell it, with an H or without an H. And people get pretty, like, lines are drawn. Like, there's the camp with the H, there's the camp without the H. Both camps think they're right. Both camps think that's the way you spell Sarah. And I get that. So there's, you know, when I see Sarah without an H, I go, well, that's my name, but, like, it's incomplete. Like, you haven't finished writing or typing. And then the last name was Gray. And my last name is DeGray. So I kind of had to laugh at myself, because I'm like, who the fuck is Sarah Gray? It's Sarah without an H, Gray.
This literally is not my name.
I was just, you know, I was like, this is not my name. And this is a repeat offense. And I'm like, my mom and stepdad have been together for 20 years. This isn't a new relationship. I'm like, well, you know, he's not old enough for me to be like, oh, grandpa, you know, he's not. He really isn't. I can't give him that excuse. Right. So then I'm, you know, but, you know, whatever. But I had a kind of a laugh over it the other day. I was like, who is that? I almost felt like I was tampering with mail, but it was my address. I was like, I guess it's close. But yeah. But yeah, you know, communication too, we can, you know, communication in our particular profession. You know, we're in fitness, and communication, you know, no matter what it is you do, communication is really relevant and important. But certainly, you know, if I'm training with Mujib and I've got a heavy kettlebell in my hand, like we've got to be able to communicate fairly well.
Very clearly, yes.
And very clearly about, you know, what's about to happen or what the expectations are. And what would you like me to do? And I don't know if you've picked up on this, but, you know, you'll say, you know, 10 of this, 5 of this, 10 of this, 5 of this, or whatever. And I think I usually repeat it. I don't know if you've caught on to that.
Yeah.
I think I'm fairly consistent in that, but it's like important for me when I hear what you say that I say it back.
Yeah.
But it also just helps me remember what it is.
Right. Because on those times when there's something else going on, then sometimes it's like, wait, what did you say?
Yeah, it's just like that extra, like, okay, I'm gonna say, and you know, I don't. I at least prove it to myself, like, okay, yes, I know what the task is, you know. But I like doing that in a training situation. But yeah, communication is so important when, you know, especially in our field, like asking someone what to do, what side to do it on. You know, I took a yoga class once, and oh God help this teacher, like, she would say right when she meant left and the other way around. It got very confusing. Right. And I think it got into her brain at one point, and then it was like, you know, and I've had those moments personally, so I totally empathize. But, you know, just little things like that. It's like, okay, what do you want us to do? Where? What? Like, right, you know, and it can be very, you know, hard and confusing for people if they don't have clear instructions, especially when it comes to moving their body if they've got something, a weight. Right. You know, because there's that extra responsibility.
Which goes into, it makes me really think about relationships and how we draw relationships in, especially as fitness professionals. In this context, it applies obviously to a broader context too, but it's like, you know, the difference between a 30-person group class where, you know, it's beautiful thing that you know everybody's name. Like that's why I love teaching with you, because I see that you know everybody, you know, like you're calling names out way across the parking lot. Now, granted, some of these people have been coming for a long time, but some of them haven't been coming for a long time. And, you know, as I'm saying this, like, I'm realizing some of the tricks of the trade. Like, you have a list of everybody's names written out, and you know some of the names on the list too, but you're actually really just good at being able to place people's names with their faces. And so it creates a really welcoming environment, you know, like when you come for the second time in 2 months and somebody knows your name and calls your name by your name, like it's a different welcome. Thank you. Wow, you remember what my name was. I've only been here once, and it was 2 months ago, and it was only like in passing, you know. And so, like, I love that. But I've definitely been in environments where an instructor might see somebody 9, 10 times. Like, I have a client myself, actually, a one-on-one client. He's like, man, there are people, I go to these group classes and people still don't know what my name is. I've been going to the group class for 3 years. And the guy is still like, what's your name? That guy. You know, watch this guy. And he's like, my name is Dave. Like, you know my name is Dave. You have to know. You signed me in. Right, you know what I mean? But I feel like in certain situations where, once again, if we've created a relationship with this person that is minor, it's minuscule, they're a minor player, they're a pawn in my mind. I don't need to remember what their name is. Like, that's such an unwelcoming energy. You know, it's such and it's so felt immediately. And that's what I mean when I go back to what I said a moment ago, where it's like, if I can talk to you for 4 minutes and you never once stopped to ask me to clarify myself, and you didn't understand what I was saying, then you must not actually respect what I'm saying. Right. So in communicating with people in the world, for me at least, it's imperative that I am clear with you. It's imperative that I'm understanding what you're trying to communicate to me, because what you're communicating to me obviously is important enough to you that you're taking the time, the breath, and the energy to say it out of your mouth or to act it out with your actions. And if you're going to present that to me, then the way that I see it myself is that it's my responsibility to honor that. And if I don't understand what you're saying, to ask you to clarify. And if I'm not picking up on it, then to let you know that I'm not picking up on what you're putting down, you know. It makes me think of people speaking 2 different languages. Not literally, not like you speak Cantonese and I speak English, but like we both speak English. But in my version of English, the words that you're saying don't mean what they mean to you, right? Or like the emotion that you're putting out, or the external expression of the way that you're acting. It's like if I'm screaming at you, but I tell you I'm not mad. Well, then what does that mean? You know, like how is the way that you're expressing not lining up with what you're expressing? And, you know, again, is like the key to finding that clear communication, that to creating that strong relationship, is taking the time to understand, again, how can I better comprehend what it is that you're taking the time to put out there, especially if I'm getting mixed signals. Like, are you actually mad at me? No, I'm not mad at you. Why would you think that? Well, because to me, X, Y, and Z equals anger. Oh, well, damn, I never would have thought that, because for me, X, Y, and Z doesn't equal anger. Only anger equals anger. I don't know what passive aggression means. Oh, well, shit. Okay, well, now we're better communicators now. Yeah. Now we have a stronger relationship because you better understand what it is that I'm putting out there. You know, I'm in a mostly, whatever. I'm in a pretty heteronormative relationship. Like, I'm a cis man, I have a cis woman who's my partner, right? Now, with that said, there are differences in the way that we communicate with each other, right? Where, and I was raised by women, so I got this from my folks. Like, there's a level of aggression in which I'm totally fine communicating with that my wife doesn't respond well to at all, you know? And it takes having to take that step back and be like, I'm not angry. Like, I'm not actually angry at all, you know? And what is it in my own internal dialogue that's happening that's not allowing me to convey this emotion without what seems to this external person who's receiving the emotion as anger, right? And again, back to like, how much do I value this relationship? How much am I willing to step back and put my own predefinitions on the shelf and say, let me come to this communication, this relationship, this table, understanding that I'm only a half of it, like you're the other half of it, and the things that I'm saying you're going to receive, you're going to play them through your track, and then you're going to bring them back to the table. So again, it's just like communication, intentional communication, being deliberate about the way that we're communicating with people, and actually taking into account this other person who I'm sitting here trying to communicate with or talk to. Right. You know,
it's so interesting. A couple of things come up. For me and sort of my past and my upbringing, I never saw my parents argue. But then when I was 9, they divorced. So it was, you know, sometimes when we think of divorce, we think, oh, you know, kids must have witnessed, you know, arguments or this or that. We might have preconceived notions about what that even is. Like, what does a divorce look like, or what is it leading up to the divorce? What is that environment like? But what made it really confusing for me is that I never, you know, early on, I never witnessed or was part of relationships where there were arguments, and then people figured out to get through those arguments, to come to an understanding that you can actually have a pretty heated argument with somebody that you love and care about, and then you can come to a resolution, and you can, like, everything can be okay. But part of that is through that communication. And sometimes that communication takes, you know, raised voices or slamming doors, or someone's got to go for a walk or whatever. But I spent, you know, a decade in a relationship that I steered clear of confrontation and arguments. Because in my mind, I don't know, I thought that healthy relationships were relationships between people that never had an argument, never disagreed. Which now, like, for me to say that is like, that's insane. Like, I can't even think of any relationship where there's not some kind of a disagreement on some level. Some kind of, especially when we've talked about, I want to be in relationships where people are going to come to me with the truth. And sometimes that truth is going to be painful, or sometimes that truth is going to be holding a mirror up, and it's going to be uncomfortable. So, you know, kind of learning the art of argument, or learning the, you know, it's to communicate, to, you know, express yourself, or, you know, I've definitely sometimes the person where I hold back, and I, you know, sometimes don't always say the things on my mind, because I'm like, oh, okay, well, I just want this to be over. I want to find the resolution. So, you know, and really figuring out like how to find my voice. And then I found myself in situations where I'm a Sagittarius, so sometimes I can be a little bit quick and short with people and sharp, especially with people that I care about. You know, it's, what is there sort of that, it's we hurt the ones we love the most. Like, it's easy to, you know, or you know, you live with someone long enough, like, you know how to get under their skin. Right. And those times where, I mean, we've all done it. You're like, I know how I can piss this person off. Like, I know what to say. And you know, or whatever. But yeah, just like so many levels of that. But like learning how to argue and survive that. Like, be okay with that. It's like, you know, that a strong partnership doesn't come from two people thinking the same way about everything, the entire, you know. I heard a very wise thing said to me recently about, or it wasn't said to me directly, I heard it, that if people just think the same, like, that's a cult mentality. And they were like, I don't want to be in a cult. You know, I want difference of opinion. I want to be challenged. You know, and certainly I think ultimately we want to be in relationships of respect. So, you know, I'm up for debate. I'm up for, like, you know, I kind of love verbal sparring. You know, at one point I did toy with the idea of becoming a lawyer. I mean, there's something about litigation and debate and that I love. I wasn't on a debate team in school, but I think, you know, I would have enjoyed it. So I do love that. But ultimately that it's a respectful exchange, you know, but that you can argue, you can get heated, and you can get to the other side, or you can come to an understanding, but it's hard. Right.
And it takes being intentional.
It does.
You know, like, it takes an intentionality of wanting to get to the other side.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with somebody. It was like around breakfast, like making some pancakes, and we got to talking about just like this country and the history of this country. And, you know, there was basically like their perspective was like, why are some people so immature? And specifically, like, white men in power sometimes can come off as very adolescent, you know, especially like military background and things like that. Like, there's a lot of bravado that gets put out there that actually can be very deep adolescence, you know, still back into the slapping towels in the locker room mentality, you know. And the conversation, my perspective of the conversation is because it's like, it's very easy for people to be handed everything that they want, you know, like if you're the oldest son, it's easy, like you're always the best or whatever, like everybody's going to try to kind of like uplift you in that way of telling you that you're right, you know, or that like the world is designed that this archetype of person is the right person all the time, you know what I mean? And how that can really stunt somebody's growth, personal growth. Like, for instance, I was riding with one of my mentees one time, and, you know, I was coming to take a turn, right? And I got a 16-year-old in the car with me too, so I'm not like speeding, and I'm on Pine Street at that. So I'm like, and I'm taking some weird turn, you know, behind the yoga studio across the street from Tom Girl. And so that's a funny turn, you know?
Yeah,
and if you come flying around it, there could be like carpet trucks coming out, people on segways around
exactly
that corner, all that stuff. Like, you're not coming in there fast. So I'm slowing down to take the right turn, and this dude is like on my ass, you know? Flies around me, flicking me off and everything like that, drives past. This is Pine Street, Burlington, Vermont. Like,
where are you going?
Like, where are you really going? Like, not only where are you going, like, out of anger, like, trying to get somewhere, but, like, where are you going now? You're right in front of me now. Like, and so I say to the mentee, I'm like, that's a grown boy. Yeah. He was like, what? And I was like, that's a grown boy. Like, that is an adult boy. Like, that's an adult, probably has wife, probably has kids, probably an asshole to them too. Like, is just, because to him, flicking somebody off and driving away doesn't come with any repercussion or consequence, you know? Whereas, like, where I'm from, like, it comes with great consequence. Like, you don't know who it is that you're flicking off. You don't know who it is that you're dealing with. And, you know, I'm from D.C., but I've heard these same stories from people from Springfield, Massachusetts. Like, I had a girlfriend whose father told me a story one time, very similar sort of thing. Like, guy flicked another guy off at the thing, and then now they're at the gas station with a confrontation.
Yep.
And so, you know, like, if you come from a place where you know anything can happen at any point in time, then you don't act like an asshole unnecessarily.
Right.
But when you come from a place where nothing could ever happen to you, I can't believe this would happen to me. I'm fine everywhere I go, you know. Then you can be an asshole to anybody that you want to, and you get away with it because everybody knows Brad, he's an asshole. He's our asshole. No, not really. It's not. We're in 2020 now. You can't just get away with it because you're fucking the oldest son or whatever. But my point is, like, in this conversation, and you can even hear it in my voice now, I was getting pretty heated about it, you know, because, like, there's historical reason for that, especially in American men. Like, there's a historical reason for why, like, the white American man can be such an asshole sometimes. And why some of them can be assholes all the time, you know, that sort of idea. And so I'm getting heated, and I have to take a second and look at this person's face, and I'm like, I'm not mad at you. And they were like, oh, thanks for saying that, because I thought that you were now putting me in that category. And I was like, no. Like, we're talking about, and I'll be very blunt here, we were talking about fuck shit, like, meaning, like, we're talking about, like, nonsense. Like, and if I'm talking about nonsense, I'm going to get passionate about it being nonsense. But, like, you know, you can play devil's advocate without taking on the role of the person who you're trying to advocate for. You know, you don't have to all of a sudden be the target for my anger. And I think that in conversation and communication, especially in arguments, sometimes that happens unknowingly.
Yeah.
Is like, you know, I can be so passionate about my point, and I'm like railing it, but you think like maybe I'm railing at you. And in that situation, maybe that person's natural personality, maybe the way that they're going to come naturally is like, well, I'm just going to be quiet and take this. You know, and then it's a miscommunication, you know, and we have to, like, for me in my relationships, I've had to take that extra step to be like, what are you really feeling right now? Oh, well, I'm feeling like this. Like, oh, well, you know, I'm not mad at you. Or like communicating with somebody else, like, I feel attacked by the way that you're communicating with me. Like, do you mean to be attacking me with what you're saying right now? And they're like, no, I don't. And they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe you want to know that, though. Like, maybe well, at least for me in that situation, it's important to me enough. It's important enough to me to let you know that the way that you're coming off to me is aggressive, is attacking. It's putting me on the defense. It's making me want to come back with that same type of energy. And is that the end goal that we're looking for? And 9 times out of 10, we end up on the other side of that in a better way, because it's like, oh, well, we're actually talking about the same thing. We just have different words for it. Or we're actually expressing the same emotion, but through me, it expresses like this. And that's what we said before about yin yang. Like, we're not all supposed to be the same. Like, that's not how you know, we can't all build the right corner. Like, I got to build the right corner. You build the left corner. This person's going to build that corner, and the other person's going to build the other corner. Like, we all have to come together with our ideas, with our complete selves as much as possible, especially in a community. That's how I feel about it.
Oh, I was just, when you were talking about that, I also just thought of an instance where when you're in those moments where you're kind of railing about something, and the person listening, they may offer up, well, did you, you know, and then you like redirect. What do you mean? I've definitely done that before. Like, you're supposed to be on my side. And, you know, like, I'm recounting. I've done that way too many times. No, you know. But, you know, and again, like, always appreciating the people in my life that can check me.
Right.
You know?
Totally. Need it. I need that in my life.
Right.
I'm thankful that I had older siblings that could always just check me. And my wife is very great at checking me on my shit and being like, to the extent where I have to be like, this is really just my opinion. Like, I'm not an expert on this at all. You know? Like, I'm going to Google search this real quick before I finish. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. No, I am right about this, you know. But at the same time, it's like, you know, we as individuals have to have the humility to be able to do that in a conversation. And that goes back into what I was saying about relationships and the types of relationships that we're trying to cultivate, is that with my wife, I'm cultivating a relationship where we can understand each other as much as possible. So in order for me to be a part of that relationship of us understanding each other, I have to understand myself too.
It's so true.
Know? And I have to understand the way that I communicate best or worse, you know.
Oh, okay. So that actually just a little light bulb or sparked an idea in thinking about the language that we use to speak to ourselves, and not necessarily that we're speaking out loud to ourselves, although I do love talking to myself in the car.
Yeah, me too.
But you know, just when we're alone with our thoughts, the things that how we treat ourselves, the language and the way that we communicate. And I saw something the other day that was in the spirit of, you know, talk to yourself how you would talk to a best friend or talk to somebody that you really care about, because we all have these tendencies, I think, to the negative self-talk, or when we can be the harshest critic or the worst to ourselves. And I know I've been that way at times, and you take a step back and it's like, God, like, I would never say what I just thought about myself. I wouldn't say that to someone else. I would think, oh my gosh, I'm thankful that I'm in a place where I'm trying to constantly practice a better inner dialogue and the way that I talk to myself. But I think that's a really important piece of, you know, communication.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the times that's what comes out in the way that folks communicate with each other. And I'm speaking for my own self, like, when I haven't known enough about the way that I'm talking to myself, then those situations where I get into disagreements with people, that angst or that pent-up anger that I might feel about my own self is kind of the root. And maybe it doesn't come out as anger towards that other person. Maybe it actually, my anger towards myself comes out as meekness towards the other person, or sadness, or quick, you know, I'm ready to just do what you say, you know what I mean? That sort of idea. So know thyself comes back to it, you know, know thyself and judge thyself highly, I guess. You know, like, I had a friend of mine, she said it best. She's like, nobody's ever treated me as good as I treat myself. Like, nobody's ever given me nicer gifts. Nobody's ever cooked me better food. Nobody's ever treated me better sexually. Like, I owe it to myself to be good to myself. You know what I mean? Because we're so quick to be good to other people. And, you know, there's a level of authenticity that has to come with the reciprocal. Like, it's the yin yang. I can't just be good to you and be shitty to myself.
Right.
It's like I said earlier today, it's like, because eventually the shit's gonna go bad, and I'm gonna be just as shitty to you as I am to myself. You know what I mean? In this best of the best situation, I can be shitty to myself and still be nice to you. But as soon as we get intertwined tight now we're sharing a life or a space, you're gonna catch it. You'll get all that anger that I have for myself. And we've all seen relationships go that bad, where all of a sudden this person's not who I thought they were. Right. You know, it's because they're probably not who they think they are. You know, they're not, like, meaning, like, they're not presenting to you how they actually think they are. You know what I mean? And that could be egotistical. They might actually think that you're a piece of shit. But because they want something from you, they're not going to tell you that. Right. You know, and that, again, that goes back into my own situation. Like, I deal with people in that sense. Like, if you can't look at me as a person and respect what I've done to get to where I'm at, then you're probably going to miss something that's important that I have to say to you. Right. You know what I mean? I was working with these youths the other day, and I love the youth, because they're like, they really just are like trying to call bullshit the whole time. And I'm like, it's this very basic concept that I do, where it's like, you got a good movement, you have a medium poor movement, and then you have a bad movement. And if you're like an exercise movement, and if you're gonna do a set of 15 repetitions, right, and you don't know what you're doing, then each repetition's gonna get checked off in one of those categories. Either that's a good one, that's a medium one, or that's a bad one. And if I'm doing 15, then maybe out of that set of 15, like, my last 5, I'm really, really tired and they look really bad. So I've logged 5 bad repetitions. And then maybe in the middle they were all right, and maybe in that set of 15 I got like 3 good reps, I got 8 middle reps, and then I got 4 bad reps. So you got to be careful of, like, at the end of your workout, how many good reps are you logging, how many middle reps are you logging, how many bad reps are you logging. And then I was like, and then the flip side is like, so, I drew this whole chart on the board as I do, and it's like checks in the good, checks in the middle, checks in the bad. And then I just inversed it. I was like, and all of a sudden you can just end up with like most of your checks in the bad and no checks in the good. And the kid was like, wait, and like shut me down like that, and was like, when's the situation that would ever happen? And like, I'm a kettlebell lifter, right? And I'm a kettlebell trainer, right? Yeah. So like, sometimes people have no idea how to lift a kettlebell.
Yeah.
It's just the truth. So I was like, well, if you don't know what you're doing and you just think like no pain, no gain is the best thing to do, then you might end up doing 15 worthless reps.
Right.
And have a soreness in the front of your shoulder that you think is supposed to be there.
Right.
But it's not.
Yeah.
and after an hour session of like just kind of chiming on this sort of paradigm shifting idea, because again, it's like the no pain, no gain mentality. I said to somebody earlier today, I said, well, it's like if you're bumping into the walls every time that you're running down a hallway, right? So you're supposed to be sprinting, and we're doing hallway sprints, right? You're sprinting down the hallway, but like, every 5 steps, like you're smashing into the wall, smashing your elbow into the counter, all these different things. Then at the end of the workout, you're like, oh man, it's a great workout. Like I'm sore, like my shoulder's sore, like my elbow's sore, like my knee is sore. It's like, well, you're actually just sore from hitting the wall.
Right.
Like you're not sore from the sprints. Like when you stop hitting the walls, you're gonna be sore from the actual running that's happening, you know? And by the end of the session, like I was able to explain that idea to the kid, and I pointed to the board and I was like, now do you understand? He was like, I get it. It's like, yeah, it's like, it's pretty basic concept. But again, it comes from that place. It comes from a great place for the kid, because he's like, questioning the adult, like, don't just trust what I'm telling you. Ask me, I want that, engage with it. But we have this now relationship that is this kid bringing to the table his questions and me welcoming his questions and giving him answers. So again, if I was egotistical about what I hold on to, the knowledge that I have or my experience, then I might just like, whatever, kid, you don't know, you just got to listen to me. But in reality, no, I'm trying to cultivate a relationship in which you can trust the things that I'm saying to you, not just because I'm the adult and you're supposed to listen to me, or in a different situation, right? Not just because I'm the man and I know best, or not just because I'm your father or your partner or your, not just for these other reasons, but because I've taken the time to meet you halfway, to say, this is your concern, this is where I can meet you with your concern, and this is how we can get to the other end of this thing through clear communication, through intentional communication,
It makes me think of the worst phrase ever is "because I said so."
Oh my God.
And I don't know, maybe it's being a child of the 80s, or having heard that here and there. It wasn't a full-on parenting style, thankfully, but I definitely it was present when I was coming up. But yeah, it's like you want to cultivate that curiosity and build that trust. I think it's great if youth or whoever, that they're asking a question or why, or want to know more. That should be celebrated, instead of just, blindly following something, or, because I said so, or because, again, it sort of has to do with how we shape our perceptions of authority figures, even, for example. We had a conversation, we were during our training session, where you mentioned going to the dentist, right? And sort of in that communication, that the dentist seemed perfectly fine to make themselves comfortable without securing your level of comfort or what you were okay with. And that's a relationship. I mean, that if someone's going into your mouth with power tools, like they've got some power over you, quite literally. It would behoove them to make sure that you are comfortable and okay with the process, So similarly, again, when we're in a training situation, it's like, and we kind of joked about it in that session, that you know, I know that, you know, you and I have a relationship and you've gotten to know me in the course of not just what we're doing here today, but in the course of our training relationship, and that you can push me and say, okay, we're going to work with 25 pounds today, or we're going to work with 30 pounds or whatever it is. But we've built that sort of trust and understanding, and that, you know, either I've showed you that I'm ready, and, you know, we've sort of gone step by step by step to kind of inch our way forward. But I, you know, especially in a personal training relationship, it's making sure it's not about your comfort. You know, if I'm the client, it's like, okay, let's make sure that you're comfortable with what I'm about to ask you to do, and set up the environment, you know, for that. So it was interesting. I found that really interesting, that in that clinical setting, you know, like, what?
It reminds me of like a barber telling you the haircut they're going to give you.
Right.
And you'd be like, well, no, I don't want that. Yeah. And then be like, no.
This is my first time. I hope that's okay. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of situations, and just like, you know, showing empathy, you know, making sure that, especially if there's just sort of that sort of built-in authority, right, in that structure, you know, and those relationships can be taken advantage of, and they are all the time, all across the board, you know, whether it's through, you know, race, gender, sexual orientation, like there are structures of power where people are, you know, constantly employing these kind of tactics, if you will.
That's the best way to put it, the tactics.
Tactics.
Again, intentionality. You know?
Yeah. But, you know, in closing, I just, you know, I love this conversation. Once again, we could go on and on and on.
Started a whole another hour-long conversation just now. It's something that you just said, so I'm excited to get into that.
We got to have part two, because we didn't. There's so much more to. We didn't even talk about written communication, or you know, that's a whole other level.
Miscommunication through text versus voicemail versus
oh my
email.
God. All of that, intentionality versus impact, like, you know, there's so much, because, you know, that's, I'm sure I'm sure there's a million podcasts on the subject of communication, because it's so deep. But yeah, I kind of want to come full circle and just come back to where I said that this one particular listener did find that our communication styles were, she liked it. It was easy to listen to.
I love it.
Which is very cool. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the time, and I could easily just say something else in regards to that. But I will, actually. It is because we're intentional. And we both have a respect for each other. Like, I have a respect for you that makes me want to hear what you have to say.
Same.
So I'm not going to speak over you or cut you off or dominate the conversation with my standpoints, because I want to know what your standpoints are. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. And same. And, you know, if we can just pat ourselves on the back a little bit more. I do. We are going to do a year in review. I think we're going to do that next week. But I do love sort of the rhythm and the way it kind of feels like a game of tennis, but like a friendly, you know, and just kind of, you know, I hit the ball over to you, or maybe basketball, I don't know. But yeah, we just kind of keep passing it back. And there's something always that I find when I'm listening to you that turns on something for me, and vice versa. And that's what makes this so fun, and why it, you know, whips and winds the way that it does, which is, again, is very natural. I mean, I'm going to remind you guys that there's no edits. This is one take. And so it's just very cool. So I always thank you for your respect and your ear, and yeah, and how lucky we are to get to do this.
Awesome. Yeah, you're always welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. So you guys have an awesome rest of your day. As a reminder, my name is Sarah with an H, DeGray.
My name is Mujib with a B at the end.
Exactly. We hope you guys have an awesome day. Take care.